LMCT 6595.
Pickett, she lays it off Teresa Polias. It's an absolute peach. Ayres driving. What a hit from Melina Ayres. Wow. And Sam Kerr has a hat-trick.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of Radio Dub here at the FNR Studios down in Docklands. Oscar, busy week of NPL football action, getting closer and closer to the Women's World Cup. My nerves are rising, getting the full, we're going to soon get the official squad for the Matildas coming out.
Yes.
And then we can all feel the feelings that we have about the squad, positive, negative, excited, nervous.
And everything in between.
And everything in between. We don't discriminate with our feelings, feel all the feelings. But to bide our time till the Women's World Cup, we've got some NPL action, which is fantastic. I enjoyed it. I called the Box Hill Heidelberg game on the weekend. You did Alamein Bourne-Darrett, which was a thrilling game.
It was.
Do we want to start with that, or do we want to start with the most recent game on Monday, South Melbourne Bulleen?
I feel like we've got to go with the showpiece of the weekend.
Let's go with it.
And on paper, at least, the showpiece was definitely Bulleen against South Melbourne at the Ven on Monday night. Full-time score 1-1, which keeps us precariously hanging in the balance.
And I think it's probably a fair result based on the season and how these two teams play. I think Bulleen are the more complete side, but South Melbourne probably play the more entertaining brand of football. So it kind of balances it out, with the discrepancies in there. I thought South Melbourne, they had moments, and Bulleen late equaliser, and they keep right up there with South Melbourne, and it's where they need to be for the rest of the season.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting one. I mean, so Bulleen do continue that they still haven't been beaten at home this season. That late Alana Janchevsky goal keeping that record intact. Yeah, look, it was an interesting game. It was pretty even on the whole. Both teams had periods where they were better. I agree that I prefer the kind of football that South Melbourne try to play. Bulleen extremely reliant on Paige Zoyce, which, there are worse players to be reliant on than Paige Zoyce. She's,
friend of the show.
She's consistently pulling through, and she's dishing out those balls left and right time and time again for the likes of Beattie Goad and Delani Janchevsky to run onto, which is a pretty reasonable strategy when you've got those players in your team at your disposal. But look, South should have won this game because they had the 1-0 lead, and they just lapsed defensively in injury time when no one was tracking Alana Janchevsky. There was 3 players in the wall, everyone else was in the box, and Alana Janchevsky
I feel like we mentioned this when we called their Nike FC Cup game, Oscar, where we were like, every time Alana Janchevsky gets the ball within a vicinity, you think you could, if you're feeling ambitious that day, you could take a strike at goal. She should always be marked. She should there should be warning signs straight away. She's near enough to the box to do something. And they completely fell asleep and just allowed her to drift to the side. And I couldn't believe when I saw the goal, I couldn't believe nobody in the wall at least said, I'm going to abandon the wall because there's a low chance they're going to go direct shot on goal here. I'm just going to follow Lana Janchevsky. And then as soon as she got the ball out, she had metres ahead and she had all the space to just create something for herself.
I mean, it was a cracking finish. I suppose, though, that's the threat that Bulleen have is that Paige Zoyce was standing over the ball, and if Alana Janchevsky can hit them from anywhere, so can Paige Zoyce, as we know. So they kind of constantly have these threats who you just can never really sleep on because they could hit it at any point from any position and it could end up in the back of the net.
You say that, but watching Paige Zoyce play, I think that Paige Zoyce, from that, maybe if the ball was on the other side, I think she maybe would have gone for goal. But I just feel like she's less likely to go for a direct shot on goal than Alana Janchevsky.
From a free kick situation?
From a free kick, yeah. If Alana Janchevsky was standing there, for sure, you stay on the wall. Even if Paige Zoyce is out that side, you're a little bit more hesitant. But I think that if Paige Zoyce is there, that the thing that she wants to do more is facilitate for her teammates. If it's setting the ball up nicely and leaving it up the top for someone to get a head on, or playing it to Janchevsky like she did, that's what she wants to do.
Yeah, I suppose it's as much as from open play as anything that Paige Zoyce is really dangerous because she she did throughout this game take a lot of shots from range, actually, and they were constantly testing Miranda Templeman, friend of the show, co-host of the show, Miranda
exactly.
Templeman.
Don't disrespect.
Yeah, you're right. There are layers to this. There are there's a tier list, and co-host of the show, Miranda Templeman, is in.
Got to get her back on soon, actually.
Really should do, because she's established her position at South Melbourne. South Melbourne, who played solid across the whole in this game. There was a period, particularly at the start, when they were struggling to play through Boleyn's press, but there were other periods where they looked really, really slick. And the goal that they scored, even though it ended up coming from a Gabby Garton just not quite able
Deflecting
to...
it out into the path of runner, Danielle
kind of palming
Wise,
it into the box where Danielle Wise was there. But the actual build-up move was really nice. And there were lots of those moments throughout the game for South Melbourne. So I remain optimistic about what they can do. You kind of see these flashes week in, week out. They just haven't been able to string it all together and consistently execute that game plan, because if they do, they'll be really dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, this week, I suppose it is tough when you're playing Boleyn, who are as good as most teams at pressing and disrupting and making it difficult. And also,
they really slow the tempo down. They can really just make everything grind to a halt and be very, very difficult. And they excel in those types of game where it's a bit rough, and then it's kind of, you've just got to let your players be, stand out. And they've got players who stand out. On average, their teams are probably better than most teams they're going to face in the competitions, and player for player, they're probably winning each individual matchup across the field. So if the game slows down, it kind of works in their favour. But I also just don't think it is beneficial to their playing at their ultimate and best capacity.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, speaking of which, I do want to mention, I was thinking watching at Aroha Little, who in a team which is stacked with A-League players, or former A-League players, she's kept her position and she's contributing week in, week out. And there's a reason for that. It's because she's been really impressive, I think, this season.
Yeah, I think something interesting that we spoke about on this pod, I think was Lockie was on the show. We were talking about the Alana Murphy and Paige Joyce, and talking about the differences in their playing style. And we said that Paige Joyce plays a little bit deeper, and Alana Murphy is better at going forward and driving and facilitating and creating those kinds of moments. And Paige Joyce is a little bit more defensive a player. I was wondering if it would serve Boleyn a little bit better this year to allow Joyce to be more progressive in her play, because I think it makes her a better player, and I think that it continues to let her develop. But I think she's a good enough passer that if you give her more opportunities to drive from the back, whereas sometimes I see her play out and then the next person is the one who really drives Boleyn forward.
I mean, I guess the risk with that, but this is a risk either way, is the fact that for me, looking at Boleyn, if I'm matching up against Boleyn, I'm going, if you stop Paige Joyce, you're kind of stopping all of their ball progression. They can go down the wings, the likes of Janchevsky and Godin and TJ Vlanic. They are capable of doing that, but it's much harder to score from the wing, obviously, than playing through the middle. So I feel that they're already very reliant on Paige Joyce. So perhaps you're right in that, well, they might as well just go all in on that and say, go on, Paige, do your thing, take us forward with you. And they're kind of doing a version of that already. I do want to go back. I did say that South Melbourne should have won this game, and to an extent that is true. I think with that being said, Boleyn probably had more good chances. There were a couple of headed opportunities in particular. Tiff Eliadis had one, and I think Alana Janchevsky had another where they either got their head to it or narrowly missed out. There was also in the first half, Tiff Eliadis had this shot, this kind of second ball where she just hit it first time, and it was so nearly one of the goals of the season because she hit it sweetly and it looked from the angle of the camera.
We're still waiting here on this pod to get a Paige Joyce long-range effort that just grows in the back.
Well, this one was Tiff Eliadis with the shot, right? Yeah, but it was, there were lots of situations where you thought there could be howitzer.
No, but seriously, Boleyn are one of those teams where, like, some of the efforts they take, they're very ambitious, but they're not far off getting it. And I don't know if we've seen the goal of the season yet. We've had some really good goals.
Well, this weekend we had a lot of contenders for goal of the season. I mean, we'll talk about those as we get to the other games, but there were some crackers going around. And I guess just to wrap up on this game, so the end result, considering everything else that happened, is that Boleyn are still on top of the ladder. That is having played a game extra than South Melbourne, but they're 3 points ahead of South. So if South win that game in hand, then they'll both be on 27, but South will be ahead on goal difference. So it doesn't tell us much more in terms of who's going to finish on top, who's going to win silverware. Those two teams have shown themselves to be pretty evenly matched.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, next game, which
Sure.
Oscar, we've got some options. We can go back.
Should we go in reverse chronological order
Yes,
then?
that's what I was just
Yeah.
about to suggest.
Let's do it.
Why don't we let's head to Wembley Park,
Wembley Park.
where I was on Sunday.
Yes.
It was Box Hill taking on Heidelberg. I'll be honest with you, both teams have played better throughout the season. It was a bit of a slow game. It was just, I think Box Hill, when Sophia Sakalis and Mindy Barbieri came back, what I really enjoyed about them was they're insistent on pressing constantly and making it really, really difficult. I think in the last couple of weeks, they've kind of just slowed down a little bit and they're not pressing as hard and they're allowing teams into games that truthfully they shouldn't fall behind in. And in the Heidelberg game, the kind of ebbed and flowed into whoever's favour was going. I think Heidelberg started really well and so did Box Hill. And then there was just this lull in the first opening half, and then lucky for Box Hill, just kind of out of just luck where it Tian McKenna was playing forward and the ball's just deflected off the referee and everybody's kind of almost stopped playing and the referee just continued to supposed to do that, but that's what he did. And it fell to Emily Koss. She was standing in the middle of the park and just played it out. And everybody in Box Hill just kind of kept going the moment it went forward, and Sophia Sakalis scored just before halftime. And I think that really changed the dynamic of the game. And once they came back from halftime, Mindy Barbieri doubled the lead from a beautiful pass.
What a pass.
Like, honestly, one of the best passes this season.
Sophia
Sakalis, where she just... Honestly, you couldn't have weighted it that much better, and she just continues to show why she's one of the best in the league. But I thought the Box Hill, obviously they won the game, they deserved to win the game, but I wish they'd go back to that game style where they're just playing on the front foot a little bit more and just going to take it all out to each team instead of sitting back and allowing teams to dictate the way the game's going to be played.
Well, it really was as much an indication of any of how much Sophia Sakalis and Mindy Barbieri have elevated this Box Hill team, how they were the two involved in both goals, really. But for Heidelberg, it's now 3 straight losses. They haven't scored a goal in any of those 3 games. Those losses coming against Box Hill, Bayside and Boleyn. I mean, Pokuah, what in your mind's gone wrong for Jono Clemente's team?
I think that losing Danielle Wise obviously is it's a massive loss. And it's only going to get tougher because Steph Kalia went out in the first half with an injury as well. So I don't know what the long-term projections of that, if she's going to come back soon enough, because they need her. I just think that going forward, they're a bit predictable. They want to go out, work out wide, and then they want to build up from the back. And if you're stopping the likes of McKenna in the midfield, they kind of don't have much else going forward. They're a little bit slow, a little bit predictable, and when they're crossing it in, there's just kind of like nobody there half the time. And then one of the worst teams at defending set pieces also. It's just, I just don't think they have anything that's extremely special about them. And I think that if you can shut them down from playing from the back, the opportunities they have going forward are relatively kind of simple, and it's a little bit disappointing for a team that was doing so well last year.
Yeah, well, they've fallen down a lot, haven't they? I mean, looking at the ladder as it stands now, down in 6th are Heidelberg. That win for Box Hill brings them level.
But for Box Hill, unfortunately, that goal difference from that Burundara losses really cost them.
That's true.
At the end of this week.
But in terms of points, I mean, we've now got Calder, Heidelberg and Box Hill all on 19, Alamein on 18, Preston on 17. And those are the teams nearest the top 4. So it's really getting clumped just behind Bayside at the moment inside the top 4. So again, we've been saying it for weeks, but 9th up, all of those teams are still a legitimate shout to make finals, which makes this a very exciting competition at this point.
Yeah, it really does. And I think obviously some of those players from Box Hill and from Boleyn, and we also spoke about South Melbourne, they're also players that are in contention for individual awards this season as well. So there's still a lot to be played for with these teams remaining. But I think an important win for Box Hill to get back on track. It's their first time they've won 2 games in a row in the last 2 seasons at Wembley Park. So that's obviously an important stat.
That's an incredible stat.
Yeah.
First time they've won 2 consecutive games at Wembley Park for 2 seasons.
Yeah.
Wow.
Difficult. Which you wouldn't suspect, but last season was a bit of a struggle for them when you actually like go back and you think about it.
It was, but they've always felt like a bit of a streaky team. So
Yeah.
you felt like they would have won a couple of games in a row at some point at home. But there you go.
Yeah, exactly. But what's it called? We'll go back. No, I just
got distracted, Pokuah.
No, I didn't get distracted, Oscar. I didn't get distracted. I was just thinking that Box Hill and Heidelberg, I feel like we've spoken about Box Hill a lot in the last few weeks. And I think for Heidelberg, I don't know. I think that when a lot of teams during the season made additions to their squad and got better players in, I think Heidelberg kind of stood pat, and unfortunately for them, everybody else has kind of surpassed them. And then now they're having these injuries as well. It's just a little bit, it's difficult for them. And I think their game style is not suited to the way other teams are playing in the competition. So it makes it even more difficult for them, you know, to get into games and to maintain. Obviously, John Clemente really wants to play out from the back, but it just kind of isn't working. And they don't really have another options when they're going forward as well.
And if Steph Galea is actually injured, that becomes severely problematic. I mean, it's really interesting. Their next 3 weeks, Heidelberg, they're playing 3 teams who are directly in contention with them, sitting just outside those final spots. Their game against Alamein, on the weekend is postponed until I think the start of August now. Yeah. So there's a bit of a break there. But then they play Preston and Calder. So they're 2 teams who are
really different,
right there with them in that race. Preston away as well. So that's not going to be easy. But
it's difficult. And then the final, I think the latest game played on Saturday was Bayside taking on FV Emerging, which I don't know if we've got egg on our faces because of the way we've spoken about Bayside in the last few weeks, but we also say this about FV Emerging all the time. They are a side that you just kind of don't want to face them sometimes because they will click one day and you'll just be randomly click, and it will be the most frustrating situation because they have lots of really talented players who just obviously haven't hit their peaks in their career. They're just getting there, but they've got lots and lots of talent. And some days it's just going to click for them. They're going to find all those things. And unfortunately for Bayside, they were on the end of a 3-1 loss.
Well, that is especially true for what you say about FE Emerging when you've got Alana Cordolino in your team, because, I mean, I've spoken a lot about Alana Cordolino this season because she's just so difficult to defend and so difficult to deal with. And she was at the centre for pretty much everything that FE Emerging did on the weekend. Scored the second goal, got the assist.
That's a great
for the
second
first goal. And the second goal was
goal of the season contention up there.
I mean, the only question is, did you really mean?
It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter because I remember Francesca Iamano scored this goal. I think it might have been against FV Emerging, and she just kind of hit it. She was like on the far right hand side, and she just kind of hit it and it went to the back. And that was up there for me for goal of the season. So I think that one's up there. It's not bad.
But she's a fantastic player, and like you say, when you know, on any given week, FE Emerging, they can just find an extra gear, which they did against Bayside on the weekend after we've hyped up Bayside so much for the last month or so. But yeah, there was also it was a game full of great goals because Bayside's goal was scored by Miwa Sasaki direct from a free kick. And
fan clubs, we're fan.
We have many fan clubs at Radio Dub.
I just love so many of the Japanese players that we have in this competition are just so technically gifted, and they bring such a level of dynamic play to each of their sides, and I'm a big fan of it because I don't want to see every team play the exact same way, and they provide options, and I'm all about options.
The competition is elevated by having these players in the competition. There's no doubt about it, and Miwa Sasaki is a clear example of that, of a player who just makes Bayside so much better as a team. She is so important to what they do. As much as this was a real setback for Bayside, who we were speaking in the weeks leading up to this game about how they were beating the teams above them, and we were going, oh, right, awesome. They've got some really tough games. They beat Heidelberg, they beat Burundara. You're going, oh, gee, that's big. They're the teams that they need to be beating. Now, as long as they just take care of FV Emerging, they'll be fine. And then it all falls apart.
Because FV Emerging is such a tricky team.
Yeah.
They are a side incredibly talented and obviously learning bits and pieces, but some of these players are so bold in the way they'll play at times at FE, and And, that's okay. And that's what we like to see. But where does FV Emerging sitting second bottom of the table with Southern? And
they are still a bit away from, I think it's Preston who are third bottom. I think they're like 6 points or something like that. So there's a gap to close.
And much like for Southern, obviously they went into the season thinking something. They would have liked the season to go a different way with the likes of Preston and Boroondara coming up with them. But I think at this stage, FV Emerging and Southern United, they've got different ambitions for how they would like the season to go. So, it's just about getting your players a little bit better, and that kind of performance for FV Emerging is a great booster for all those players and their confidence and their national team ambitions.
Well, it's a big win because it's FV Emerging's first since the 14th of April when they played Box Hill at Wembley Park. I remember calling that game, and that game where Box Hill were a very different team then from what they are now in terms of their organisation and everything. And Alana Cornelino had a field day amongst others. So that's a long time between drinks for FV Emerging. It was always going to be tough to live up to the standards that they set last season. And look, they've probably done about as well as you could reasonably expect.
Because the squad is, I would say, and I think it would be fair to say, the squad they had last season was probably a lot stronger. When you get the likes of Sarah Kane, who's the gold medalist in your team, and you don't have her.
Sarah Kane is a huge loss.
It's a huge loss.
Brilliant player.
So, their squad is, less experience in their squad, and I would say that talent-wise, just because of where these players are in their career, is a step back. So, for what they've done this season, if you're just picking up a couple of wins, here and there, and you're just continually seeing improvement, that's all you want to see out of these developmental squads.
Yeah. It is the nature of the beast at FV Emerging. But big win for them. Bayside setback. They've got South Melbourne and Bulleen the next 2 weeks, so they've got their work cut out for them.
Absolutely.
Although they are still cushioned in the top 4. They've got over, I think, a 4-point lead over 5th. So they're still.
I love to see it.
They're still there. Their destiny is very much still in their own hands.
We need to get someone from Bayside. We need to speak someone from Bayside.
I think so too. There are several good options.
Yeah, we do. We'll discuss.
We'll get someone.
And then we'll head to your game, Oscar.
Let's.
Thrilling game. Alamein 3, Boroondara 3, and Boroondara coming back from 3-0 down. How does that happen?
See, driving to this game, Pokuah, and you looked at the radar and you saw that there was this skinny strip of wet weather that was rushing across Melbourne. And so you knew that there was going to be some rain. But boy, was there rain for the first 10 minutes. You had
with no cover down at Dorothy Labour.
There's no cover at Dorothy Labour West. Nope, nothing like that. You kind of, and just as we were kicking off, it just started absolutely pelting down. We're all kind of barely surviving. And Boroondara did not adapt at all because they couldn't get their feet on the ball at all. They couldn't string 2 passes together. They clearly hadn't adapted to the conditions. And Alamein took full advantage, in particular Sydney Allen, who scored twice in the first 10 minutes to put Alamein in the ascendancy. They were looking pretty comfortable. Boroondara was slowly working their way back in, but then Rebecca Saber scored in a transition moment to make it 3-0, and you're going, gee, is that it after just half an hour played? Could that have Alamein landed their punches that will get them the win? And I should add context to this, which is to say that Alamein, their winless run in the league is up to, I think it's 7 games now, which is their longest winless run in about 4 seasons in NPLW. Which, I mean, we can bring the stats to, both of us can. But yeah, it was. You're trying to compete with me. I'm trying to compete with you, Vico. My
stat was pretty good, though.
Your stat was good, so I'm trying to match it.
Of course.
So Alamein, they were in the box seat, I guess. But what everyone knew watching, though, is if any team's going to come back from 3-0 down, it's going to be Boroondara.
It's so weird because I missed the first half of this game, and then you sent me a text, and I was like, let me flick this game on. And the second half, Oscar, this game is so indicative of Boroondara as a team for me. Defensively, at times, they can be a little bit loose and you can get an opportunity to score. And Alamein, lucky for them, they did capitalise on 3 big opportunities. But Boroondara going forward are also a terrifying team going forward. And if you just allow, if they get one back, you just kind of feel like the momentum just builds up with them. And I thought when it got to like the 90th minute, like, I think Alamein might hold on. And then Boroondara got that last goal, and it was I think they were still going for that 4th as well.
Well, they were. I mean, so it's worth remembering with the whole comeback started from this ridiculous attempt from Hayley Gertz from around the halfway mark. She just, have a ping. And it somehow went in.
Maybe she was on the phone to Alana Yancheski.
I don't know. She must have been. There was something in the water in NPLW this week because the Alana Cordolina goal, the Miwa Sasaki goal, the Alana Yanchevsky goal, they were all these incredible strikes. And that's what got them back in it. Korea Aquino, who we won't talk about it too long because we talk about it every week because she's so good. But what she does outside of scoring goals is also massive.
She's a really good facilitator. And
she's everywhere.
Getting her teammates involved is something I was really impressed with. I think we did what game was it? The Burundara FV Emerging game. That's the thing I noticed the most about her, not, her goal scoring threat, but just her ability to hold the ball up and actually allow her teammates to play off her. I think it's such an important and impressive skill that she's got. And I think it's a big reason of why Burundara are doing so well this season.
And the dropping deep, that was probably even more prominent against Alamein than it has been just about at any other point this season. She was everywhere and she scored. But even then, Alamein, credit to them. When it was 3-2, you thought, Burundara are coming. They've got over half an hour. They're going to win this 5-3. Lock it in.
They held on for ages.
They did really well to regain some control for the final half an hour. And it was unfortunate for them in the end that it was a substitution, Marwa Sumayora, who came on, scored the goal with just a few minutes remaining, could have scored a goal in injury time that would have won it for them. She had a really good opportunity, which they missed. But nonetheless, 3-3 the end result. So it was a breathless game. Burundara, I think it's worth noting, did that with a couple of really key injuries that happened around the halfway mark. So Ellen Turner just before half-time had to be brought off. Becky Lim at half-time was substituted. So they did that comeback without two of their key creative
Becky
forces.
Lim has been, I think, is she highest on assists at the moment?
Becky Lim is leading the competition in assists this season. So to come back...
Can we say she's a friend of the pod without being on the pod?
Yes, she's a friend of the pod.
Well, she's a friend of yours.
And she will soon be on the pod. So it was, so to come back in that situation was really impressive. And it was really a lot of what's really good about Burundara this season. Disappointment for Alamein, as much as they might have taken a point if you offered it to them before the game. They were also 3-0 up, so it'll be a tough pill to swallow.
I'm nervous for Alamein. Obviously, this season's not over, but I'm nervous for them heading into next season because if they aren't able to improve on the back half of this season, I think a lot of those players may decide to, look elsewhere for their NPL opportunities because they've got some really talented players that I think could make a lot of the other teams' squads as well.
It's like they're a victim of their own consistency for the last few years because the other teams that are coming up around them, the likes of Box Hill and Preston, let's say, it feels like there's more upside to them. There's definitely more of like, I don't know where this team could go than there is with Alamein, where you feel like they've got
I kind of know who they are, and I don't think they've got enough X factor to get them to that top 4 race, and even if they were to get there, to actually win. So would you rather just kind of bottom out and start again, or you have to add pieces? And I just don't know if you're a player who's got an option to go to play for some other teams. Is Alamein the team that you really want to go and play for?
Well, in a week that all the top 4 drop points, it means that Burundara remain just a point behind Bulleen at the top, 2 points ahead of South Melbourne. Again, South with that game in hand. So the top of the table race is going to go down to the wire with Bayside just a little bit behind them. And then we've just got the one more game for the weekend to cover, back to Friday night at BT Connor Reserve. Preston Southern United flagged it as a bit of a banana peel, perhaps. For Preston.
You said that. I definitely didn't.
You're right. I did. I won't drag you in with me. But they dealt with it well, Preston. And in particular, why not finish off with just a Miri Nishimura?
She's just that good.
Wonder goal.
She's just that good, and I think it was much needed for Preston because the week before they had lost to Calder in the tough, that 2-1 loss. But I think they needed that. And I think that it was relatively comfortable for them in the end. I don't think Southern offered them too many, hazards along the way. But, if I'm happy for Preston to get those 3 points and keep in touch with the rest of the teams in terms of finals hopes.
Well, if we want to talk about breaking winless runs, that was Preston's first league win since the 15th of April. So that's like the same amount of time since FE Emerging have gone. So both of those teams have broken their winless runs in the same week.
Lucky for Preston along the way, they were picking up some points with draws here and there. So
that's true.
That's what it's allowed them to keep in touch with everybody else.
And also their really good start. So 10 weeks later, both of those teams are back winning again. I don't feel like I was entirely out of place to tip that this was a tight one for Southern. But nonetheless, Preston got it done. Miri Nishimura is a freak.
Yeah.
Just an incredible player. She also got the assist for the second goal because, of course, she did. And she is keeping Preston in this finals race where they are still. They needed this win and they got it. So that takes them to 17 points, which, again, is just 6 points behind Bayside, who are in fourth. Plus, Preston have a game in hand. So
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't we veer to Nike FC Cup territory?
yes.
Because we're going to
touch on this.
we're going to get a replay of one of these round 15 matchups, which is going to be Bulleen taking on South Melbourne. Is it going to be at Lakeside or the Ven?
I'll have to jump in there, Pokuah, and say that that's not quite what's happening.
You know what's happened?
So,
no. My brain thought about this week.
It's been a long week.
It's been a long week. No, I did know this. I apologise. It was Calder taking on South Melbourne, and Casey, the pride of the Southeast,
Yes.
Southeast football. Casey Comets are taking on FC Bulleen Lions. I do apologise. That's my bad.
But those are the ties. And Casey against Bulleen has its own narrative. You mentioned the underdog Casey.
No, it's the pride of the Southeast. We're not underdog story. We're the pride of the Southeast. Be serious.
I don't know why you can't be both of those things, but okay, sure. The pride of the Southeast, Casey Comets,
That's right.
taking on FC Bulleen Lions in a David versus Goliath kind of matchup. Quite seriously, it'll be tough.
No, it will be tough. It'll be tough, and I think that the Calder South Melbourne, I think we're going to learn a lot about those two teams. Is the magic of the Cup so serious the Calder are going to, go against the odds, which I think South Melbourne walk into the game as favourites just with their league form. And can we get a fantastic story of my KC Comets beating that all-powerful FC Bulleen Lions team?
I mean, that would be a huge story. I suppose the fact that the Calder South game is at Keilor does, of course, play in their favour. But no, I agree that the most likely outcome from this, in theory, would be a Bulleen South.
I was looking a week. I was thinking
final.
I was thinking grand final. That's what's happening.
Yeah,
I've just played the games.
but South going to Keilor, that's going to be really tough in the Cup, where that is Calder's home. Both literally they're playing at home, and also it is their competition home, the Nike FC Cup. So that'll be good.
It will be. Really,
I'm looking forward to those.
No, I'm looking forward to it also.
They both
Oscar.
have very exciting ties.
Hopefully, we get to call one of those games.
Hopefully. And then other than that, we've got another week of NPLW action coming up.
Yeah.
Bayside against South Melbourne's probably the game that stands out immediately. That one at Kingston Heath.
Interesting. You say that, and I'm actually very excited for Preston Boroondara.
It's also very exciting.
Yeah, I'm intrigued about how that game will go because I think it'll be a good test for Preston to see if they're really back on track, or for Boroondara as well, because I think Preston they've become a better defensive team. They just have some lapses throughout, but it'll be interesting to see if Boroondara can break them down.
Yeah, I agree. It'll be a kind of a great test for both teams. For Boroondara, do they still have that level? They're going to beat Hickoner. It's one of the toughest places to go. And Preston, do they have that extra gear that they can go to? But the great news is for any viewers of NPLW is that on both Friday and Saturday, it's set up for a double header either way. Double header, Preston Boroondara, followed by FV Emerging Box Hill United on Friday. And then on the Saturday, you can go straight from Bayside, South Melbourne into Southern United, Calder United. It's just...
Absolutely. Well,
what else would you do with your weekend?
You're not calling a game on the weekend because you're heading to Byron Bay. I am calling...
I don't know if anyone needs to know that, but okay.
Sorry,
sure.
if you want to follow Oscar to Byron Bay, please do. No, I'm calling Southern United taking on Calder on Saturday at 5:45. So that should be a really, really interesting game. Yeah, I look forward to it.
Big test for Southern.
Big test for Southern.
I mean, Calder. Whereas for Calder, I mean, are they back? Are they the real deal?
Exactly.
Are they here? They could be.
Either way, we will find out. I have been Pokuah Oscar. You have been, what's your name?
Oscar Rutherford.
It's always good to see you, Mr. Rutherford. And bye for now.
Pickett, she lays it off. Teresa Pokuah